hear it from me directly. FEMA is ready. Our agency is postured to respond to this storm and help the state of Florida. And I have been providing regular updates to President Biden and Vice President Harris as Milton gets closer. They have directed me to do everything possible to be there for Floridians in the coming days. Now, a little bit more about Hurricane Helene. I have been on the ground here in North Carolina for over a week now, and I have had a great partnership with Governor Cooper and his team. I have been incredibly impressed by their tireless work to support North Carolinians impacted by Hurricane Helene. We continue to support the governor's priorities, including search and rescue operations, clearing roads to reach isolated and limited access communities, and delivering commodities directly into the hands of survivors. We also have hundreds of FEMA personnel and thousands of federal responders on the ground going door to door to get assistance to survivors who need it. Our call centers, they have been answering thousands of calls every day, working to reach every corner of impacted communities. And so far, we have been able to distribute over $60 million from our individual assistance program directly to people here in North Carolina. This is incredible, meaningful progress. And we at FEMA stand ready to both continue this critical work while we respond to Hurricane Milton in the coming days. Yes, this is going to be hard. 2 massive storms have come our way in only a matter of weeks. But this is what we do. FEMA is ready. We are here to help people. We are here to save lives. And that is exactly what we are postured to do for these incidents. Again, I will be traveling to Florida later today to join my team in the state on the ground. I'll be there to ensure every Floridian gets the help they need when this storm passes and to provide timely updates to the president and the vice president. My leadership team, they are the best of the best and some of the most experienced emergency managers in the nation. We remain postured across the region, managing the ongoing Helene recovery work for all affected states and tribal nations. Now, before I take questions, I just want to take one more moment to speak directly to those in the path of Hurricane Milton. You need to prepare for catastrophic impacts. This is going to be a serious storm, one that could forever change communities that are still recovering from Helene. Please continue to listen to your local officials and seek safety immediately. We do not need to lose any lives as a result of this storm. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael Hart. I'm over here at the FEMA Region 4 press office. I'll be your host today for today's call. I don't see any images on here for people to raise their hand.
I'll take the first one from Tina Q. Tina's free to speak.
All right, Tina, over to you.
Aloha, this is Tina Criswell with the TQ Group. My question is, has there been ongoing dam and spillway inspections down in the Florida area? And is there any anticipation of any of those waterways needing a release or any concern for any of those dams or spillways? Thank you.
Tina, we are closely connected with the state of Florida and their team and providing assistance for any of the inspections that they need. I know that when I was in Florida the other day speaking with Mayor Castor, she talked specifically about the work that they are doing for the spillways ahead of this storm and what they may need to do afterwards. And so what I can say is that we have the resources available as the state or the county and the city needs them to ensure that we are giving them what they need to prevent any damages that we can have resources to help them with.
Next question is from Ellen Nilsson.
Hi, Administrator Criswell. Thank you so much for doing this. Ellen Nilsson with CNN. I just wanted to ask on continuing on the misinformation threads that you talked about yesterday. I'm curious, in the lead up to Milton making landfall, if you are still seeing a lot of the same types of misinformation out there, specifically as it pertains to FEMA assistance, what kinds of FEMA assistance folks can receive, or if there are any new threads of misinformation cropping up distinct from the aftermath of Helene. Thank you.
Yeah, Ellen, I mean, we're still seeing some misinformation out there. I do believe that the volume of the misinformation is starting to go down, but we need to continue to now remain focused on what our mission is, and that our mission is here to help people. We have people on the ground here in North Carolina, but all of the states that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene: Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia. And we will continue to provide assistance to all of those impacted while we are preparing to respond to Hurricane Milton. And so we are going to stay focused on this. We are not going to let the misinformation be a distraction to the important work we need to do.
And then I wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. Do you have any updated numbers on FEMA staff that are currently in Florida ahead of Milton compared to yesterday? Thanks.
Yeah, I do. So ahead of Hurricane Milton right now, I know that we have over 1,000 personnel that have been in Florida responding to Hurricane Helene, as well as personnel that have been on the ground supporting the recovery from the hurricanes from the previous years. We've moved in over 1,200 search and rescue personnel to be able to support those immediate life safety needs, as well as additional personnel from across the federal government. Like I mentioned, the health and medical assessment teams, the power assessment teams, as well as my incident management assistance teams. And I moved one of our national teams, our most capable, right into the city of Tampa to embed with the mayor and her team so we can have a seamless flow of communication as they are experiencing the impacts, and we can help provide the resources they need for those initial life-saving efforts and start those recovery efforts immediately following.
All right, next question from Eric Katz.
Hey, thank you. I wanted to, I was going to ask a very similar question, but maybe I can just drill down a little bit. So you have 1,000 personnel that were already in Florida, plus 1,200 more that are now there. And can you speak to how many personnel are deployed from FEMA elsewhere for Helene response? And then do you also have a tally in terms of how many, you still have on reserve as needed going forward?
Yeah, Eric. So again, we have over 1,000 personnel that remain in Florida from Helene and previous disasters. The 1,200 is additional search and rescue because we know what a critical threatening situation this storm is going to bring. And so we have sent as many resources as we can into that area to support the efforts that the state has already pre-positioned into the area. Across all of the states that have been impacted by Helene, I have over 5,200 federal responders. Remember, FEMA is just part of the team. And so that is from across the federal government, from all of our partners supporting the response and the recovery efforts in all 6 states that were impacted. As it relates to what we have left available, we have a layered approach to our staffing. And when we think about our primary staff, our disaster staff, those are the folks that are designated that this is their full-time job. But we are also bringing in our staff from across headquarters in our regions that don't do disaster work directly full-time, and they have all been trained to be able to pitch in and help out when we need additional support, when we have multiple responses like this. I think we plan for multiple events. We've done this before. We are prepared for this. We will certainly have challenges along the way as we move people around, but this is what we're good at. This is what we plan for. And we have enough personnel between FEMA, our federal partners, to continue to support the response and recovery efforts from Helene, as well as what we're seeing and potentially going to see from Milton.
Thank you very much.
All right, next question is from Derek Johnson.
Hi there. I was curious, going back to the misinformation topic, I am curious what FEMA may be doing in its communication strategy to reach non-English speaking residents, particularly folks like Spanish speaking populations that have been the target of mis and disinformation campaigns in the past. Are you doing anything different, or is it just doing the same thing that you're doing but in Spanish, or is there anything else you're doing to target and reach out to those communities regarding some of the mis and disinformation? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, Derek. We're always providing all of our outreach and our engagement into communities in multiple languages. We take the time to understand the demographics of a community and what the different languages spoken are. And we have staff that can support that and do information and outreach directly with people in the field. In fact, yesterday, when I was in North Carolina, we had one of our Spanish speaking personnel that was there specifically to make sure he was doing the outreach and the engagement face to face in the communities to help them understand what resources and programs are available to them to help counter some of the misinformation that's out there. And so we will continue that effort. It's something that we do in every disaster. And just because of the level of outreach and misinformation we're going to have to counter, we have additional staff and we're plussing up those efforts.
Next question is from Tom Frank.
Hi, thanks very much. How much is in the disaster relief fund today?
So the report that I got yesterday, which is public, is I think it was just over $11 billion was in there as of yesterday morning.
Sorry, you said at a hearing about a year ago when the supplemental that the administration had requested was in doubt, that the amount of money left in the DRF, quote, would be insufficient to cover all of our ongoing life-saving operations. Is that an issue right now?
So we monitor our disaster relief fund very carefully, Tom, and we use different methods to make sure that we can always meet life-saving needs. The biggest tool we have is what we call immediate needs funding, and we keep a reserve within our disaster relief fund to make sure that I can always cover these life-saving activities like we're seeing right now. And that's exactly what we did. We went into immediate needs funding on August 7th of this year to ensure I had enough money, which is what we needed to respond to Hurricane Helene. With the CR, I've been given the full authority to spend against the president's fiscal year 25 budget. And so I have the funding and sufficient resources to support the ongoing responses to Hurricane Helene as well as Hurricane Milton. But I'm going to have to evaluate how quickly we're burning the remaining dollars within the disaster relief fund to see if I'm going to have to go back in and ask for additional funding sooner than what Congress is planning on right now. So, we had thought that we would go into immediate needs funding in December or January. I need to assess that every day to see if I'm going to be able to wait that long.
Next question is from Rebecca Santana.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. There is a lot of confusion out there about what FEMA's role is when a disaster strikes. And I think there seems to be at least some popular conception that FEMA kind of comes in and takes over the response and the recovery. Can you kind of clarify a little bit what is the agency's role vis-a-vis state and local officials? And then secondly, I had a question just separately on the Small Business Administration program. Does that money, the money that the disaster loans to people for homeowners and businesses, does that come out of the DRF as well, or is that a separate pot of money?
Rebecca, so on the first question, really good question. All disasters start and end at the local level. The first responders, the local emergency managers, this is what they plan and they prepare for. And when the needs exceed their capability, then they bring in additional state resources. And when we know it's going to be significant, that's when FEMA can come in and support their efforts. And so we do not come in and take over any response. I have been a local emergency manager. I know the steps that they are taking right now to prepare for this storm, as well as what they're doing to recover from Hurricane Helene. Our role is to augment the incredible work that our local emergency managers, our first responders, and our state partners are doing each and every day to support the people in their communities and make sure that they have the resources that they need to meet their priorities and their focus and their efforts. We will continue to bring those resources in to support them as they manage these events. Oh, and then your second question, Rebecca, on SBA, that is there, they have a separate appropriation that does not come out of the disaster relief fund.
Next question is from Delaney.
Hi there, can you hear me?
I can, Delaney.
Perfect. Has FEMA been able to reach everyone yet in Western North Carolina? Last we heard.
Delaney?
Yep.
Delaney, it's a little garbled. I think we're going to try something on our end here real fast.
Okay.
Try again.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Has FEMA been able to reach everyone in Western North Carolina? Last we heard on Monday, the mayor of Lake Lure said that FEMA has yet to arrive.
So Delaney, I think one of the things, again, to emphasize is that we are here to support the incredible efforts that the locals in the state are doing. National Guard from North Carolina has been out in these communities. And just because somebody doesn't see a person wearing a FEMA shirt doesn't mean that we are not supporting those communities. Much of the water and the food that has been delivered through the National Guard resources and other agencies really come from FEMA stockpiles, in addition to the amazing outpouring of support from all of the donations and the voluntary agencies out there. Our 1-800 number and our disasterassistance.gov was up right away. In fact, we already have over $60 million in the hands of people across Western North Carolina to help them with the financial assistance they need as they start their recovery. And we continue to bring in more resources to embed with the local emergency managers and the State Emergency Operations Center so we can continue to move these resources into exactly where the state and the locals say they need them.
Next question is from Lucy Gilder.
Hello, my name's Lucy Gilder from BBC News. Thanks so much for holding this briefing. I had another question about FEMA's funding. Are you able to say how much of that $11 billion has been set aside specifically to deal with Hurricane Milton?
So that is the total balance within our disaster relief fund, and we are continuing to reimburse jurisdictions across the country for their recovery projects, as well as using that to fund the response efforts. What I need to do is monitor the balance of that and how fast we're burning through it for this response to determine if I have to go back into immediate needs funding to make sure that I have enough to continue to support another event that may be coming, because we're not out of hurricane season yet. And so again, the funding is there to support Helene and Milton. What I want to make sure I have available is enough funding to support another event, considering that we are still in hurricane season.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is from Madeline No.
Thank you for taking the time to do this today. I also wanted to ask about the disaster relief fund. I was wondering, at what point now do you think you will have to ask Congress for additional funding, and how much FEMA would request?
Yeah, so we've already put in a supplemental earlier this year for just around $9 billion. But as we have continued to have an increase in the number of events and these two back-to-back really catastrophic events that are going to cost a lot of money, we are evaluating right now how much more we are going to have to go back and ask Congress for. So the $9 billion request still stands. We're going to have to add additional funding on that. We're assessing what that need is going to be right now.
Next question is from Maria Sosa.
Hi, thank you for having us. You talk about misinformation, and there has been, it's true, and it also has been used politically. But it's also true that a week ago, Secretary Mayorkas warned that FEMA didn't have funding to last through hurricane season. My viewers, as immigrants, are particularly vigilant of what Secretary Mayorkas says. And I'm going to read the quote. He said, FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. So what do I tell my viewers to make out of Secretary of Homeland Security's quote and what he's saying? Thank you.
Yeah, Maria, again, I have enough funding to get through this event and support all of the needs of everyone that was impacted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton and what we expect from Milton. But hurricane season is not over yet. And so what I need to do is ensure how much money is being used and how much more I will need to make sure we can get through the rest of hurricane season. And so the goal here is to make sure that we are assessing the impacts from this storm against the Disaster Relief Fund and giving an accurate estimate to Congress about how much more we will need to meet these current needs. But also, I have over 100 open disasters across the United States for recovery. And I need to continue to be able to reimburse these communities for their recovery projects, as well as sustain the response that we're seeing right now. And so this is a really dynamic and fluid situation. And so again, assessing it right now to see what the impacts are against the Disaster Relief Fund so we can be better informed about how much we're going to need, not just to get through hurricane season, but also to continue those critical recovery projects happening across the United States.
Ma'am, our next question is from Patricia Vasconcelos.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. At the beginning, it was said that some people might not be able to leave the affected areas. So what are the specific instructions for those and for the community that are speaking Spanish or Portuguese? If you could repeat what are the official channels that they might, reach out in order to have accurate information. Thank you.
Yeah, so Hurricane Milton is going to have a wide-scale impact across Florida. We are going to see significant impacts across the western coast, but we also know that the eastern coast of Florida is going to have impacts. And so it all depends on where you are right now and when the storm is going to reach you. And so the best advice I can give is to make sure you're listening to your local officials, your local news stations in your language, so you can get the specific information about your steps of where you are at. It's going to be different for everybody depending on where they are located right now. But the biggest thing that I want to say is, remember, if you still have time to evacuate, all you have to do is go perhaps a few miles inland. You just need to get out of that storm surge evacuation area. What we see from these storms is that the majority of the fatalities come from the storm surge, come from the water. And so if you're just going to have wind, you can hide from the wind, you can stay secure in your area. But if you're in those storm surge evacuation areas, those are the ones where we see the loss of life. And those are the people, if you still have time to evacuate according to your local officials, please take the time to get to safety now.
Ma'am, doesn't look like we have any other hands up. We'll give them a pause here if we have any other questions.
Rebecca, you're free to
Rebecca,
talk.
hand back up.
Oh, yeah. Hi, this is Rebecca again from the AP. One question, you had mentioned that there's 100 open disasters or over 100 open disasters, previous incidents, previous storms that you guys are still working recovery on. Can you put that into perspective? I mean, is that a unusually high number or about average? Can you give some sort of idea where it fits?
Yeah, Rebecca, no, this is a high number. This is the most open disasters that I have seen with FEMA, and it's because we're seeing an increase in the number of events. We had an incredibly busy tornado season earlier this year. We had severe weather that had catastrophic and historic levels of flooding across many states this spring as well. We've had wildfires across much of the West, right? All of these, this increase in the number of severe weather events we're seeing, as well as the complexity of many of these events because of the amount of damage that they're doing, is increasing the number of open disasters because the recovery is more complex and it takes longer to help reimburse these communities as they rebuild from the weather events that they have experienced.
All right, our next question is from Ari Natter.
Hi, good morning. I was curious if you could elaborate on something you said earlier in the call when you said Milton would forever change communities. Can you say how and why?
Yeah, Ari, when we just look at the forecast for Hurricane Milton, it is bringing catastrophic winds, it's bringing catastrophic storm surge, increased flooding. And so we know that we are going to have significant impacts as a result of this storm. And so, again, we want to make sure that we are partnering with the communities as they respond. The most important thing right now is how do we help make sure people are safe and that we have the resources and people available to support the life-saving measures that are going to be needed over the next few days. But as we, begin to do the assessments and we begin to see what the damages are, we also want to work with the state and the locals to understand how we can rebuild in a way that's going to make them stronger and more resilient to future storms. Because we continue to see storm after storm, they're stronger, they're bringing more water, they're bringing more wind, and they continue to have greater impacts on these communities.
We have a question next from Angie Gonzalez.
Michael, this is actually a question for you. Are you guys going to make, I see it's recording. I just want to make sure or see whether you guys were going to distribute this recording at all.
We will do our best. I'm not sure exactly right now, but the call is being recorded. So
Okay.
If we can distribute it, we certainly will.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we have a question next from Ella.
Hi, all. Thanks for taking my question. Ella Nilsson with CNN. Administrator Criswell, I just wanted to follow up on something that you said about the DRF balance. I know yesterday you had mentioned that when Congress opened up your fiscal year 25 budget, it gave FEMA about $20 billion. Does that mean, given that the DRF balance is at 11 billion today, does that mean that you have burned through 9 billion with the response to Helene and other storms in the interim Milton preparations thus far?
Yeah, a good question, Ella. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to clarify. Yes, it means that we've gone through about $9 billion already, but because we went into immediate needs funding in August, we had paused obligations for recovery projects for all of those other open disasters. And so once I was given the authority to spend against the budget, we began to reimburse communities for their recovery projects, in addition to the spending that we are doing for Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. So it's a combination of all of those.
Do you have any sort of estimates on, even if they're sort of rough, on how much was allocated to the previous recovery projects versus like how much was allocated to Helene and Milton?
Yeah, I believe that the amount that we had put on hold was somewhere around $7 to $8 billion. And then the remainder is what we're spending right now to support the response to Helene and Milton.
All right, next question is from Tom Frank.
Hi, thanks again for calling on me. You mentioned, Administrator Criswell, that you've got a record number of open disasters while you've been at FEMA. Some of them are not catastrophic at the Helene level, but they're in the tens of millions or even below that. Do you think FEMA needs to raise the threshold for what it takes to qualify for disaster aid, and in other words, raising maybe the statewide per capita impact indicator?
I think, Tom, the important thing here to note is that we come in when a state has exceeded its capability to respond. And you are correct that that does not mean that they've all been catastrophic impacts, but they do have to meet an eligibility criteria that it's exceeded their capability. I think that we can certainly go back and we need to look at how we're administering this. But the important point here is that we're seeing more disasters that are truly exceeding their capability. And so as we continue to see the impacts of climate change cause more severe weather events across the U.S., we are going to see more communities impacted, and we are going to see them continue to need assistance to recover from the large amount of complex recovery projects that they're having to manage. And at the same time, we're working with them to, as they rebuild in a way that will hopefully make them stronger for future storms, because we know that when we invest in resilience, we don't have to spend as much in recovery. And so what I want to focus on as we recover in these communities, how do we make them stronger so we don't have as many impacts and we reduce that level of complexity as these storms continue to pass over these communities.
If I can just quickly follow up, in late December 2020, FEMA issued a notice of proposed rulemaking that would have increased the per capita indicator for states and also would have established a new method using total taxable income and so forth. What happened to that? I haven't seen any action on that.
Yeah, so that proposed rulemaking was before I was in this position. Right now, my focus is ensuring that we can help these communities as they continue to see an increase in the number of disasters that they're facing, and we can also help them rebuild in a way that makes them stronger.
I know it was before, but the comment period ended while you were administrator. So these rules often get passed from administration to administration. So you were overseeing it when you started.
Yeah, Tom, I think my focus when I have, since I came into this position, is to focus on keeping up with the demand of the increased number of severe weather events, but focusing also on resilience and how do we take our funding and our resources to help make these communities stronger. That's been a priority of mine since I've been in this role.
Hi, Tom and everyone. We're going to end the interview at this time. That's all the time we have for today. I am going to give Tom and everyone else on the call our email address to the headquarters press office at the agency here. So we really do appreciate everyone's time this morning. And if you have any additional questions, as I mentioned earlier, the FEMA headquarters press office inbox is FEMA-news-desk@fema.dhs.gov. This concludes today's press call. Everyone is free to drop. Thank you so much.